From Harwich round to Weymouth, sea transport officers were directed to list all suitable ships up to 1,000 tons, and a complete survey was made of all shipping in British harbours. These plans, for what was called Operation Dynamo, proved the salvation of the army 10 days later, the deliverance of Dunkirk. But everyone realized that the fate of our army, and perhaps much else, might well be decided before the week was out. I have only to add that nothing which may happen in this battle can in any way relieve us of our duty to defend the world cause to which we have vowed ourselves. Nor should it destroy our confidence in our power to make our way, as on former occasions in our history, through disaster and through grief, to the ultimate defeat of our enemies. Of course, whatever happens at Dunkirk, we shall fight on. There was a white glow, overpowering, sublime, which ran through our island from end to end. Ever since the 20th, the gathering of shipping and small craft had been proceeding under the control of Admiral Ramsay, who commanded at Dover. On the evening of the 26th, an Admiralty signal put Operation Dynamo into play, and the first troops were brought home that night. After the loss of Boulogne and Calais, only the remains of the port of Dunkirk and the open beaches next to the Belgian frontier were in our hands. At this time of this war, the most we could rescue was about 45,000 men in 2 days. Early the next morning, May the 27th, emergency measures were taken to find additional small craft for a special requirement. This was no less than the full evacuation of the British Expeditionary Force. It was plain that large numbers of such craft would be required for work on the beaches, in addition to bigger ships which could load in Dunkirk harbour. On the suggestion of Mr. H.C. Riggs of the Ministry of Shipping, the various boatyards from Teddington to Brightonsea were searched by Admiralty officers and yielded upwards of 40 serviceable motorboats or launches, which were assembled at Sheerness on the following day. At the same time, lifeboats from liners in the London docks, tugs from the Thames, yachts, fishing craft, lighters, barges and pleasure boats, anything that could be of use along the beaches, were called into service. By the night of the 22nd, a great tide of small vessels began to flow towards the sea, first to our channel ports and thence to the beaches of Dunkirk and the beloved army. Once the need for secrecy was relaxed, the Admiralty did not hesitate to give full rein to the spontaneous movement which swept the seafaring population of our south and southeastern shores. Everyone who had a boat of any kind, steam or sail, put out for Dunkirk, and the preparations fortunately began a week earlier were now aided by the brilliant improvisation of volunteers on an amazing scale. The numbers arriving on the 29th were small, but they were the forerunners of nearly 400 small craft, which from the 31st were destined to play a vital part by ferrying from the beaches to the off-lying ships almost 100,000 men. Altogether, there came to the rescue of the army under the ceaseless air bombardment of the enemy about 860 vessels, of which nearly 700 were British and the rest Allied. As the evacuation went on the beaches among the sand dunes, for 3, 4, or 5 days, scores of thousands of men dwelt under unrelenting air. Before them lay the grey but not unfriendly sea. Beyond, the rescuing ships and home. The second factor, which Hitler had not foreseen, was the slaughter of his airmen. British and German air quality was put directly to the test. By intense effort, Fighter Command maintained successive patrols over the scene and fought the enemy at long odds. Hour after hour, they bit into the German fighter and bomber squadrons, taking a heavy toll, scattering them and driving them away. Day after day this went on, till the glorious victory of the Royal Air Force was gained. Wherever German aircraft were encountered, sometimes in 40s and 50s, they were instantly attacked, often by single squadrons or less, and shot down in scores, which presently added up into hundreds. The whole Metropolitan Air Force, our last sacred reserve, was used. Sometimes the fighter pilots made 4 sorties a day. A clear result was obtained. The superior enemy were beaten or killed, and for all their bravery, mastered or even cowed. This was a decisive clash. Unhappily, the troops on the beaches saw very little of this epic conflict in the air, often miles away or above the clouds. They knew nothing of the loss inflicted on the enemy. All they felt was the bombs scourging the beaches cast by the foes who got through, but did not perhaps return. There was even a bitter anger in the army against the Air Force, and some of the troops landing at Dover or at Thames ports in their ignorance insulted men in Air Force uniform. They should have clasped their hands. But how could they know? In Parliament, I took pains to spread the truth. But all the aid of the sand and all the prowess in the air would have been vain without the sea. The instructions given 10 or 12 days before had, under the pressure and emotion of events, borne amazing fruit. Perfect discipline prevailed ashore and afloat. The sea was calm. To and fro between the shore and the ships plied the little boats, gathering the men from the beaches as they waded out, or picking them from the water, with total indifference to the air bombardment, which often claimed its victims. Their numbers alone defied air attack. The Mosquito Armada as a whole was unsinkable. In the midst of our defeat, glory came to the island people, united and unconquerable. And the tale of the Dunkirk beaches will shine, whatever records are preserved of our affairs. Let us remember that but for the endurance of the Dunkirk rearguard, the recreation of an army in Britain for home defense and final victory would be Finally, at 2:23 p.m. on June the 4th, the Admiralty, in agreement with the French, announced that Operation Dynamo was now completed. More than 338,000 British and Allied troops had been landed in England. Parliament assembled on June the 4th, and it was my duty to lay the story fully before them, both in public and later in secret session. It was imperative to explain, not only to our own people, but to the world, that our resolve to fight on was based on serious grounds, and was no mere despairing effort. It was also right to lay bare my own reasons for confidence. We must be very careful not to assign to this deliverance the attributes of a victory. Wars are not won by evacuations. But there was a victory inside this deliverance which should be noted. It was gained by the Air Force. Many of our soldiers coming back have not seen the Air Force. They saw only the bombing which escaped its protective attack. They underrate its achievements. I have heard much talk of this. That is why I go out of my way to say this. I will tell you about it. This was a great trial of strength between the British and German air forces. Can you conceive a greater objective for the Germans in the air than to make evacuation from these beaches impossible, and to sink all these ships which were displayed to the extent of thousands? Could there have been an objective of greater military importance and significance for the whole purpose of the war than this? They tried hard, and they were beaten back. They were frustrated in their task. We got the army away, and they had paid fourfold for any losses which they had inflicted. All of our types and all of our pilots had been vindicated as superior to what they had at present to face. When we consider how much greater would be our advantage in defending the air above this island against an overseas attack, I must say that I find in these facts a sure basis upon which practical and reassuring I will pay my tribute to these young airmen. The great French army was very largely, for the time being, cast back and disturbed by the onrush of a few thousands of armored vehicles. May it not also be that the course of civilization itself will be defended by the skill and devotion of a few thousand airmen? We are told that Herr Hitler has a plan for invading the British Isles. This has often been thought of before. When Napoleon led Boulogne for a year with his flat-bottomed boats and his grand army, he was told by someone, "There are bitter weeds in England." There are certainly a great many more of them since the British Expeditionary Force returned. The whole question of home defense against invasion is, of course, powerfully affected by the fact that we have for the time being in this island incomparably stronger military forces than we have ever had at any moment of this war or the last. This will not continue. We shall not be content with a defensive. We have our duty to our ally. We have to reconstitute and build up the British Expeditionary Force once again under its gallant Commander-in-Chief, Lord Galt. All this is in train. But in the interval, we must put our defences in this island into such a high state of organisation that the fewest possible numbers will be required to give effective security, and that the largest possible potential of offensive effort may be realised. And this we are now engaged, even though large tracts of Europe and many old and famous states have fallen or may fall into the grip of the Gestapo and all the Nazi. We shall not flag or